Social media platforms are engineered to captivate users of all ages by exploiting the brain mesolimbic reward circuitry. Notifications, likes and comments deliver rapid bursts of dopamine, the neurotransmitter central to motivation, pleasure and reinforcement, creating a powerful incentive to return repeatedly. This creates a self-perpetuating dopamine loop. The anticipation and receipt of social feedback reinforce behavior, fostering habitual engagement. Research, including reviews from Stanford Medicine and recent PubMed central analysis, highlights how this variable reward schedule mirrors mechanism in gambling or substance use, heightening compulsive tendencies. A Turkish study observed that frequent users display physiological and psychological markers akin to those seen in dependencies on alcohol, nicotine, or in other substances. Over time, the brain adapts by downregulating dopamine sensitivity, requiring escalating interaction to achieve comparable satisfaction and driving further use through unpredictable prediction error rewards, such as surprise notification, that amplify dopamine surges and entrench the cycle. Every time you receive a like, a comment, or notification, your brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter tied to motivation, pleasure, and reinforcement. But here's the key detail. Dopamine is not just about feeling good. It's about teaching your brain what to repeat. So when social media consistently delivers small bursts of reward, your brain starts learning. This behavior matters. Do it again. Over time, this creates what scientists often describe as dopamine feedback loop. You check your phone, you get a reward. Your brain reinforces the behavior. You check it again. What makes this even more powerful is unpredictability. You don't always get a like. You don't always get engagement. And that uncertainty actually increases dopamine release when the reward finally comes. This mechanism, called reward prediction error, is the same principle used in gambling system. Your brain becomes hooked not just on the reward, but on the possibility of it. In fact, some researchers has shown that heavy social media users can display patterns, both psychological and biological, that resemble often forms of addiction. Over time, the brain begins to associate social media with pleasure so strongly that it starts craving it automatically. It also changes brain structure and brain function. Emerging neuroimaging evidence indicates that prolonged heavy social media and smartphone engagement correlates with structural alteration in key brain region. Longitudinal MRI studies have documented reduced gray matter volume in the Anterior Cingulate Cortex and Prefrontal Cortex, areas critical for emotional processing and higher order cognition. The ACC supports impulse control and effective regulation. Diminished volume links to greater vulnerability to addictive patterns and emotional dysregulation. The prefrontal cortex (PFC) oversees executive functions like decision-making, sustained attention, and self-control, functions that appear comprised in heavy users, contributing to poor judgment and behavioral regulation. Multiple investigations associate excessive digital exposure with deficit in cognitive emotional control, heightened impulsivity, and overall cognitive impairment, all of which reinforce the risk of dependency. When overstimulated by constant digital input, this region can become less efficient. Result: more impulsive behavior, reduced ability to concentrate, weaker self-regulation. Researchers have also observed link between excessive smartphone use and difficulty managing emotions, increased impulsivity, decline in certain cognitive functions. In simple terms, the brain begins to prioritize quick reactions over thoughtful control. The relentless stream of alerts and the urges to check feeds fragment sustained focus. Heavy users frequently exhibit shortened attention spans as the brain repeatedly toggles between tasks, diminishing capacity for deep, prolonged concentration. Contrary to popular belief, chronic digital multitasking erodes rather than enhances performance. It impairs the brain's ability to suppress distractions, leading to cognitive overload and reduced efficiency. Over extended periods, adaptation to this high-demand environment overwhelms prefrontal resources, resulting in weakened impulsive inhibition and attention control. Core executive function increasingly strained by app notification and rapid content shifts. Attention is limited resource, and social media is designed to constantly interrupt it. Notifications, short videos, endless scrolling, your brain is repeatedly forced to shift focus. At first, this feels normal, But over time, this constant switching begins to weaken your ability to sustain attention. Tasks that require deep focus, like reading, studying, or problem solving, starts to feel harder. Not because your brain is incapable, but because it's being trained differently. I want to highlight, research indicates that destructive habits, including chronic stress, addiction, and excessive digital stimulation, can lead to the physical degeneration and structural alteration of the prefrontal cortex. This area, responsible for executive function and decision making, can experience reduced gray matter, fewer synaptic connections, and accelerated premature aging, according to the Cleveland Clinic. Addiction and habit formation, the PFC, is heavily involved in drug-seeking behaviors and is weakened by chronic, addictive habits. This involves structural changes that make it harder to regulate impulsive behavior. Digital brain rot, excessive use of short video content, has been linked to potential structural degeneration, often dubbed brain rot, which affect executive cognitive functions such as attention span, memory, and cognitive control. Excessive social media engagement reshapes social cognition by presenting highly filtered, idealized portrayal of life. This fosters unrealistic benchmarks, offer comparison, and diminished self-worth, often exacerbating feeling of inadequacy, envy, or depressive symptoms, particularly among younger users. Mostly because of insufficient developed critical thinking and cognitive abilities, juvenile and period patterns, brain formation, and habits, it relates to the foundation of subsequent development in more conscious years. Chronic exposure to emotionally intense content sensitizes the amygdala, heightening reactivity to threats and stressors, which may fuel anxiety and maladaptive stress responses. Some evidence suggests that replacing in-person exchanges with digital ones reduce activation of the mirror neural networks, potentially blunting empathy and nuanced understanding of others' emotions derived from real-world cues. What it means is overall maladaptiveness, social integration, and assimilation. Inability to build connections, what has intermediate correlation to life quality, as consequence emanates to dwindle life expectancy. Social media does not just affect how we think, it changes how we interpret people. Online, we're constantly exposed to curated, edited, and often idealized version of reality, and the brain naturally compares. This can lead to unrealistic standards, where people feel their own lives don't measure up. Over time, this comparison can contribute to lower self-esteem, feelings of inadequacy, symptoms of anxiety or depression. At a neurological level, emotional processing is also affected. The amygdala, responsible for detecting emotional significance, especially fear and stress, can become more reactive when constantly exposed to emotional content. This heightened sensitivity can make everyday situations feel more stressful than they actually are. There are also evidence suggesting that replacing face-to-face interaction with digital communication may reduce empathy and lower natural ability of body language reading. Part of this comes from reduced activation of the brain system involved in understanding others' emotions, systems that are more engaged during real and personal interaction. It also leads to addiction-like behavior. Neurobiological shifts pave the way for genuine behavioral addiction. Intermediate reinforcement, unpredictable reward akin to slot machines, solidifies compulsive checking while tolerance develops. Escalating time online becomes necessary for equivalent dopamine payoff. Abrupt reduction or cessation often provokes withdrawal-like states, including irritability, restlessness, anxiety, or low mood. Symptoms paralleling those in others' addiction and underscoring the brain's conditioned reliance on these platforms. Rewards are not given every time, they're unpredictable, and that unpredictability strengthens habits. It's the same principle that makes gambling addictive. Over time, users may develop tolerance. That means the same amount of social media no longer produces the same level of satisfaction. So they spend more time, scrolling more often, and seek more stimulations. And when they try to cut back, they may experience withdrawal-like effect, such as irritability, restlessness, anxiety, or low mood. It also contributes to sleep disruption. Pre-bedtime social media use disrupts circadian rhythm and sleep architecture. Blue light from screens inhibits melatonin secretion, delaying sleep onset and fragmenting rest. Even during sleep, residual arousal from content exposure can curtail REM phases, rapid eye movement, essential for memory consolidation and emotional recalibration. In 2024, meta-analysis and related studies linked prolonged evening engagement to poorer sleep quality, shorter duration, and downstream effects like mood instability and cognitive decline. In adolescence, such disturbances correlate with elevated risks of mental health challenges, including depressive symptoms and, in extreme cases, heightened. Using social media at night affects sleep in two major ways. First, there is the biological effect of light. Screens emit blue light, which suppresses melatonin, the hormone that signals your body it's time to sleep. Second, there is the mental effect. Scrolling keeps your brain stimulated, emotionally, cognitively, and neurologically active. This combination can delay sleep onset and reduce overall sleep quality. Even after falling asleep, disruptions, especially in REM sleep, can interfere with memory consolidation, emotional processing. Over time, poor sleep contributes to mood instability, reduced cognitive performance, increased mental health risks, vulnerability to self-harm ideation. Persistent connectivity breeds chronic stress markers. Many report phantom vibration, reflecting hypervigilance toward missed alerts and underlying anxiety. Fear of missing out, FOMO, sustain elevated cortisol, impairing cognition, immunity, and emotional stability while promoting anxiety and depressive states. American Psychological Association linked research ties rapid attention switching, common online, to physiological stress spikes via heart rate, error proneness, and greater mental effort per task. Social comparison against curated highlights amplifies perceived shortcomings, intensifying feeling of inadequacy, stress, and emotional distress. Many people experience subtle but persistent stress from being always available. Some even report phantom notifications, feeling their phone vibrating when it hasn't. This reflects a heightened state of alertness in the brain. This keeps the brain in a state of anticipation and vigilance. At the biological level, this can lead to elevated cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. A chronic elevation of cortisol is linked to anxiety, reduced cognitive performance, weakened immune function. Add to this the constant exposure to idealized content, and it creates a feedback loop of comparison and stress. Adolescence is one of the most important stages of the brain development. During this stage, the brain is highly adaptable, but also highly vulnerable. Excessive social media use during this period can shape how the brain develops. For example, increased sensitivity to rewards, reduced impulsive control, stronger preference for instant gratification. At this stage, teenagers are especially sensitive to social feedback. Social media amplifies this by providing immediate validation or rejection through likes, comments, and shares. This can heavily influence identity, self-worth, and behavior. There is also concern that excessive screen-based interaction may delay the development of real-world social skills.